Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, genders of all ages, welcome to episode 5 of the Live on One, the Transformers.cards podcast. I am your host, the God King Lord Zero, and as usual, I have Hawkhammer here with me.
Still going with the showboating, I see.
All the time.
But if you're new around here, this is our monthly show where we basically ramble on about what's happening in the community, what's happening behind the scenes, whatever I'm getting on a soapbox on about this month. I don't know.
Today's episode is going to be a bit more behind the scenes than usual, as we're discussing what cards we're really focusing on from Wave 10, what our concerns are, and if those concerns turn out to be valid, how we might fix them. To do that, we have Ozzy joining us once again, as he is one of the lead developers on Wave 10. Welcome back, Ozzy.
Good to be welcome back. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Before we jump into that, though, we have a new regular segment, Card of the Month. This is where we deep dive into one of the cards of the day from the past month. For our first card of the month, it's Nitro Booster.
So, Nitro Booster is an interesting thing. If you're just getting started with the game and not familiar with this card, it is a double black utility. One of the black icons is locked to a card trait, though. And then when the upgraded character attacks and it has 3 or less attack, you untap it and scrap the card. So basically, it allows you to get a free untap if your character's tiny enough. Now, this card was definitely one of the powerhouses out of Wave 5, and a lot of people had a lot of feelings about it because at the time there were a lot of black icons floating around, and this led to situations with some insane amounts of Pierce, because if you weren't around during the WotC run of the game, you may not be familiar with the fact that black icons used to last until end of turn, which was a thing that happened.
That's
and
a polite way of wording
Booster, what was that?
I said that's a polite way of wording it.
Look, I gotta cut the swearing somehow. If I were to accurately describe that, I think we would get struck down by the FCC, even though we're not bound by those regulations. But yeah, this card, funnily enough, as a little side note before we start talking about kind of what it showed up in over the course of its history, was actually part of the impetus for making the rule change to black icons only lasting until end of battle, because there were plenty of situations with the amount of orange-black decks that were floating around where you could get like 7 Pierce 6 on the first attack. Before it flips, though, you only have 3 attacks, so you fire Nitro Boosters, and then you attack again on the same turn if you have a wheel turn, since, again, these decks were getting pretty wide at the time, for like 7 Pierce 9 or whatever, and if you had a second boost in there, I don't know. But the point is, you were hitting an insane amount of Pierce, and you didn't even have to hit a ton of black icons on both attacks to make that happen, hence the rule change. And while it did hurt the card a little bit, it still has its uses, especially given the current meta where a lot of decks are still wide in the grand scheme of things, even with the rise of Metroplex and the resurgence of double primes in the grand scheme of things. So, Ozzy, I know I'm 90% sure I've seen you messing around with this in Soundwave decks, so I feel like you'd be the one to chime in here and discuss kind of where this thing is at right now.
It's an interesting card because it looks like, oh, I can just stick this on Demolisher, flip Demolisher, and just go nuts with him. But if you do that, they untap, and then the opposing player can go straight into Demolisher and maybe delete him. So it's got a bit of a timing to it. You've got to have someone else tapped who you don't mind being attacked into to be able to use it effectively. So you send in the character with Nitro Boosters, untap them, and then either pass the turn or continue on the wheel turn.
Right, but depending on the deck you're playing, like, you could still get some pretty decent value out of a defender situation. Like, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but it definitely is possible. And it also, this just, like kind of piggybacking off of that, it does set up some good attack manipulation situations where if you have somebody tiny, you need to keep on the board just a little longer, but they also need to attack immediately. This is kind of a way to do it that gets around SpySat and Battlefield's scan to an extent. And you
Yeah.
know, it doesn't use Brave or Stealth. It just untaps you. Now, of course, supporting fire is always a thing, but when was the last time we saw that?
Yeah. It's also interesting that it's got a car black icon on it, but I don't think I've seen it in cars very often. I've seen it on Demolisher, I've seen it with mini cassettes, I've seen it with a lot of 5 wide teams that might only have like a night racer in it as a car. But yeah.
And that's, I think, the reason we haven't really seen it in cars, despite it, like, in a very roundabout way, being an archetypal card. Because it does fit what cars do. Like, untaps are their thing. But the thing is, the way cars have been historically played, like, it is usually like a 3 wide, like, heavy, like, all their guys have pretty decent attack value. So this has never really slotted in. Now, I'm like, I feel like I've seen a couple of card decks that have done pretty well that managed to take advantage of, I think it was Dead End and a couple of the Stunicons. I know that much. I think it was Legendary who was playing it. I don't know when.
That
But
was in
there are
the OI1.
Yes, that's where it was. Thank you. But there definitely are card decks that can take advantage of it, but just throughout the majority of their run in the game, like, they've never had the low enough attack values to be able to fire this thing. Now, the one thing I could potentially see this working in is blue cars, because if I'm not mistaken, and I'm Googling this as I am saying this, if I could spell
I've seen
correctly,
a
that would
couple of good I've seen a couple of good sports car patrol decks with this, because the
yeah,
sports car patrol, when they
that doesn't
untap, they repair one. So
that doesn't surprise me, but Sergeant Mirage in alt mode is 3 attack. With Night Racer and him, like, it could actually have a decent enough spot in Rodimus cars in order to tank for somebody a little bit longer. Again, that's me speculating, but maybe there's a slot in there because, like, Rodimus cars, like, I think it has some potential. Like, I don't know how far it goes because we haven't seen it in an event yet, but like, maybe there's a slot for it in there.
yeah,
Not that I'm saying this card needs to be nerfed or anything, I don't think it does. But I do think it goes to show the power level of Wave 5, because I think if this card was iconless, it would still be played.
yeah, maybe.
Uh, I uh,
You
can
disagree?
we go to the hot take detector for a minute? What's the hot take detector say on that? Can we get like a little graphic for that or something? Okay, the hot take detector is saying, oh, it's borderline. Ooh, we'll just leave it to everybody to argue over it in the comments.
Okay, okay. Moving on to the main topic, we're in the middle of the stress test for Wave 10, and overall, I think things are going really well. While we have our eyes on all the cards, some more than others, there's only 3 cards in particular that we have stronger concerns about. The first card that we were looking at before we even started the event was the Dark Spark. I think part of the problem with this was there was, I don't want to call it a miscommunication, but I think part of it is many of us misunderstood the main goal that Ozzy and Wheeljank had with it. We were all focused on the ability text, where the main goal was actually to give the Decepticons an orange-blue matrix equivalent. And I think
Yeah,
once we realized that, I think fixing it was a lot easier.
Right. Now, I do
Yep.
want to jump in here and mention that the effect also had a few red flags thrown around about it. That being said, I feel like the effect can definitely thrive in the right circumstance. So maybe it shows up again in the future, but the vessel that it was in had some
As an
issues. Just
upgrade. Yeah, as an upgrade.
yeah, the main goal was to give the Decepticons something equivalent to the Matrix. So if you're building a mixed deck in Autobots, it's easy just to include a Matrix and rollouts and things like that. But Decepticons never had the ability to kind of go that way. And that's kind of what we wanted to aim for.
Yeah.
And that gets into the crux of what we kind of realized once everybody was on the same page about that.
Yeah, like I think Ozzy and Wheeljank went the what I would call the obvious route. They're like, let's just give them an orange blue. But we of course didn't want to add another orange blue card to the game.
Yeah,
So,
because the big issue with that is when you start taking that into account, you have to consider a whole bunch of icon flipping effects, most notably Metroplex. And even though this version of the card was even more dead in Metroplex, he's already at a good spot right now and does not need another orange blue.
and I kind of firmly believe we have 2 double oranges, 2 blues, and 2 orange blues. And I think we should stay there. Not counting trait locked icons and stuff.
Or star cards,
Yeah, or
which
star cards, yes.
yeah, even the trait locked ones. I mean, there was a brief discussion, if I remember correctly, where like, is Dare to Believe like could that be too much of a problem for
Yeah,
Metroplex? The
I
answer I think so far has been no, so that's a relief, but
yeah,
definitely something that we've kind of opened our eyes to, like, okay, we need to keep an eye on this going
yeah,
forward.
yeah. I did say that, had I thought about it more prior to Wave 9's release, I probably would have thought that being an orange blue, even though it's trait locked. But that said, we now have a new problem with the Dark Spark. Potential problem. I want to be
Yeah.
very clear.
Wait, first off, I think we should talk about what exactly we changed. So basically what we have done is it is no longer a battle card. It is a stratagem that basically allows you to play Matrix onto Decepticons or Unicronians.
Yeah, it felt like a really clean solution to get them a Matrix card without adding new orange blues to the game.
But you'll also notice it has no stars, and this is where the problem we are concerned about comes into play.
Yeah, so the main concern, just bluntly, is Constructicons. Getting 6 wide, all to have Pierce 1, is concerning. No one's
Yeah,
proven it's a problem yet, but no one's proven it's not a problem yet. So that's
right.
something we'll
And
be testing before release.
this is something I plan to lock down on very soon because again, I feel egotistical, but like I have played the most Devi on the server, and like if you've watched any modern aggro Devi gameplay, you know how powerful that designated target can be at times.
Mhm.
This is half of a designated target that gives plus
All the time.
attacks. So I I'm definitely going to be sitting down with this and just grinding games out and trying to lock down how much of an X factor it is in games. Now, I don't want to comment just yet on like what exact metrics I'm looking for because I really need to get a couple of games to kind of get the initial feel before I start making comments on that stuff, but I've got a rough idea in mind of what I'm going to be keeping an eye out for. I will be reporting back soon enough on what I find.
Yeah. Um, I think.
I also have something to say
Yes,
about that.
yes,
Yeah.
please.
So, so say you're against Scorponok, and Scorponok comes in and hits your first character, and maybe KOs them. Say if you sent in, Mixed Master first,
Right.
um, and you've got a handful of Heat of Battle, Designated Target, and Dark Spark Matrix. What would you play as your single play for the turn?
Ooh, that's a good question. What would I play in that situation? Um,
Against Scorponox or a Titan specifically, you're right, probably not Matrix. Because,
Yeah,
right.
but against
and if you,
even a 2
and
wide,
if you,
play Matrix.
yeah,
Because
and
one of
if
the
you did
things
play the Matrix, you'd send all your team in, and then
They
Scorponok
untap.
untaps, and then probably KOs.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah, and then you don't have
right,
a
so
leader.
so,
yeah, definitely
yeah,
playing the designated or the heat in that situation just to try to pile on as much damage and give you as much of a shot in the late game is possible.
Yeah.
And to
yeah,
be fair, that is a very real possibility because in the current meta, like at least to what we know, Metroplex is still very high up there, and Scorponok seems to be in a pretty good position.
We're going to
So
be talking about Scorponok in a little bit.
you beat me to
yeah,
saying that. So, like, Titans definitely have a place in the current meta. Plus, Fort Max is still always floating around. So
Yeah.
that is a very legitimate concern. But this is also the danger of but sometimes, where, sure, this will happen sometimes, and Matrix will be a dead card, but that's why it's a sometimes. It happens some of the time, and this is the joy of testing things, because you always find situations like this, and there's all sorts of nuances, and you gotta just wad through everything to get to as clean of a conclusion as you can possibly make.
Yeah. The
main concern I think I have with the card is more in a deck like a, so say you take the Airstrike Patrol, and you take 3 of them, and you put like a Lord Megatron or a Galvatron as the 4th character. If you have a big leader that's pumping 3 smaller characters that have stealth.
Plus, you have the extra damage engine provided by both Lord Megs or Galvatron. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
So I'm finding that in the tournament at the moment. I had the deck I built for the tournament is a Major Soundwave deck with the Spy Patrol.
Oh.
And the I used to have the old version of Darkspark, which was a more defensive thing, as a 1 or 2 of in that deck. But now I'm playing 3 of as a Matrix, and it is really powerful in a 4-wide deck where the leader is really hard to kill.
So let me ask you, how would doing something like that differ from just doing with Autobots? Because Constructicons were a concern because there really isn't a 6-wide Autobot team.
Yeah. So I have played Autobots in the past, as in the Off-Road Patrol with 3 Matrixes and Starter Prime. And that's a 5-wide team with 3 Matrixes and two leaders to put it on.
Yeah.
And that got to 2nd in one of the events.
Okay.
So yeah.
I think if the ultimate conclusion we reach is it's as broken as the Matrix is, I think I'm okay with that.
But is Matrix broken?
I would argue it should have been a star card all along.
Really?
In every sense of the way. Both gameplay and hot damn, thematically, it should have been a star card.
Yeah.
Can we go to the hot take meter on that? Oh, wait, it's broken. You broke it. You broke the hot take meter. Great. Now we have to leave it to the comments to argue over that one.
So yeah.
Yeah, or some kind of mechanic in the game that made it, like in Magic Legendary, you can only have 1 copy on the field at a time. Kind of
you know, I've often thought about that as a mechanic, but literally that's what stars are.
Also, the fundamental problem with that concept in this game is the fact that there is a reshuffling system. In the grand scheme of things, it's not going to matter. Like, you could get away with limiting things in, like, Yu-Gi-Oh, for example, because in that game, like, there, again, in, like, most games, no reshuffling, so once it's gone unless you jump through a million hoops to make it happen. This game is just like, oh, I just wait 5 turns, and, oh, hey, I drew it again. Would you look at that?
Yeah.
So
if we'd find it's a problem with wide teams, granted this wouldn't quite solve what Ozzy was just talking about, I had thrown out the idea that maybe we have to put a team size max on it.
Although I will add here, heavy disclaimer, that is not saying that is going to be the solution.
Yes.
There are still active discussions going on. We are always talking about ways to try and
for this
preserve
whole,
the
Sorry,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, this whole episode needs the disclaimer. We're not saying any of these changes are going to happen or even need to happen. We're just discussing.
Allegedly.
Yeah, we have our eyes on this, and here's what we're considering.
We need like a fake FBI warning up throughout the entire episode. Like, this is not meant to be taken as like definitive fact of this is going to happen. Thinking as such is like yada 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 or something like that. Just
some of us are
that
leaning towards it, but nothing's set in stone.
Right. Data changes on a whim sometimes, and we gotta be able to take everything in the larger picture and use that and figure out what the best move is gonna be to A, ensure that the idea can work in the game, B, ensure that that idea comes across as close to as originally intended as possible, and C, does it in a way without disrupting a whole bunch of things.
Yeah. Another fix could be limiting the size of the leader it's put on, like a 7-star or more, kind of like Callous Leadership is 8 stars or more, I think.
Okay.
And actually, I think that would make sense for Decepticons thematically, just because like the runts are always like, the runt leaders are always like kind of pipsqueaks in the grand scheme of things, and Megatron's still just willing to say shut up and punt them. So like that would make sense.
I could get behind that. Let's
and I
move
think-
on to with courage and good cheer. I recently played Wheeljank against this, and was it 2-0 or 2-1?
2-1.
Okay, yes. And they were all pretty close games. I had a hard time doing enough damage, I felt like. Or, more specifically, doing enough damage compared to how much damage they did. And Wheeljank and I spent a while afterwards talking about it. We were throwing around the idea of maybe either bumping their health down by 1, or rather increasing the damage done to them by 1.
So this is where I jump in and mention that I played against Wheeljank round 1 in this event, and looking back on it, like throughout the games, I like kind of had that feeling as well. But at the time, I like kind of ignored it just because of the fact that I was really starting to realize just how much thinking Broadside requires, and I like got the feeling like, okay, maybe I was short on damage because I hadn't figured out Broadside yet, because again, thinky character.
Yeah.
But definitely the fact that you were in kind of a similar mindset and that's starting to permeate a little bit more,
Yeah.
definitely kind of reinforces that idea that some tweaking might be necessary in order to ensure that, again, the idea gets across without completely breaking something.
Yeah. The other potential thing we talked about, again, potential, exclamation mark, potential, rather than increasing the damage done to them, was reduce their attack by 1.
That being said, that is an issue. That is one of the things we consider often when designing things is the issue of like memory space and stuff like that.
Exactly. 100%, that's what we thought
like,
too.
There are certain things that have to be phrased in a specific way, otherwise people are going to miss it. I'm trying to think of an example, but I can't off the top
The
of my
Matrix.
head. The Matrix, right? Because like that's a simple one. Like everybody in the audience, raise your hand if you have never forgotten the +1 attack from. Hey, I see you. Put your hand down.
Exactly.
You absolutely did forget.
Yeah.
That's precisely it. Yet people are more likely to remember health adjustments. Think back to every energy pack you've had on. You remember that.
Right. And I think that's because that like health has a larger effect on the game state. I know that sounds weird to say, but like
Yeah.
the health is like the most important stat because
And
that determines whether you win or lose the game. So of course you're going to keep track of
if
that
you
more
did
often.
miss it, going back and fixing the game state for missed health is a lot easier than fixing it for missed attack power.
True that as well.
So that's why I said, like, I do like the idea on paper of the -1 attack, but I think it'd be easier on everybody if we just stick to health.
Right. But just because something is good on paper does not mean it will actually execute. Just ask the Flames of the 2010s. And there's our
Was that a
obligatory
sports
ball
reference?
Sports reference.
Wheeljank mentioned another possible change, and I think we're very likely to do it since it doesn't affect balance. Rather than putting damage on a character, we reduce their health.
Out of curiosity, has any card ever reduced health?
No.
I think so. No.
I don't know how possible heal shenanigans would be with damage on them, but I
In
don't.
testing, I've seen a few things like running like Repair Bay in the main, which is 1 orange action repair each of your characters for 1 damage. But apart from that, during testing, that was the only time I saw anything tricky being done with it.
Okay. So, like I said,
And the other one was the it was a Combaticon card in Wave 9.
United Front.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, like, even though heal hasn't been a big problem, that would prevent it from being a big problem.
Yeah.
Right,
Like
but
future
also
proof.
like that's a question of like again, it's a health thing, so it's more easily going to be remembered. But like, is it necessary? Do we need to slap more things on there?
I mean, it wouldn't be more things, just a different thing. Instead of it saying put 5 damage counters on, it would say minus 5 health.
Fair enough, I guess.
I think that's pretty simple. And
Yeah,
believe
now
me,
that,
I
now
think
that I actually think through it, yeah, I see what you mean.
I think the attacker is going to remember.
Yeah.
I do really like 5 wide Dinobots just as a concept. It's nice to actually have all the Dinobots out on the field.
Right, but of course, the way that they function, they have massive buffs available, so you gotta definitely
Yeah.
turn them into a bit of a glass cannon to balance things out.
And
Otherwise,
to be fair to its current state, it didn't feel completely overpowered or anything. It felt very strong,
right, and I
but it
felt the
didn't
same
feel
way in my
broken. I did take a game off of him, and one of our other games was very close. It just didn't quite. I feel like it's one of those things where, if given time, it could become stronger.
it's like, and like even in the current state of things, like the way I can describe like playing against it, it feels like, let's say you're picking fruit off a tree. There's this one massive orange hanging there that you can almost barely reach, but it's like 2 inches too high, and you don't want to go get a ladder or something. I don't know.
I played my match for round 3 of the current tournament a couple of hours ago
That's right.
against
You just played him,
Bill
yeah.
Drink. Yeah, and yeah, it was interesting to see because there was a lot of comments before the cards were released about how it kind of doesn't make Grimlock do anything anymore. But against me, Wheeljank brought in another copy of the Snarl from Wave 2, and then combined with the Snarl was in the KO rather than the one that was still on the field. Who was trying to do that?
I'll do again.
It didn't really matter. It was just another copy of him. He stacks. He plans too when he attacks.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Because that way
Yeah,
you still have
he had one.
you have the one on the battlefield remaining.
Yeah, he had the one on the battlefield remaining, and I knew what he was doing because I'd seen him doing it in testing. So I KO'd the one on the battlefield, and then the next turn he combined with just Volcanicus instead of with 2 characters. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And again,
there's a lot of comments about how the Grimlock doesn't do much, but it does because the next game we played, he involuntarily promoted Wave 1 Sludge and was about to heal Volcanicus before I realized what he was doing.
And see, that's where I was being concerned too about the healing thing.
Theoretically, you could also bring in Paddles or someone like that and bring them in and with voluntary promotion shenanigans as an even stronger attacker. Because on the flip, it's what plus what is Paddles attack? 6.
It's 4 plus 2. Yeah.
So like, yeah, there's Paddle shenanigans there. So yeah, we definitely missed on that take.
Yeah, so I think that's fine.
It was good to see that Grimlock still wasn't like he wasn't doing what he usually does, is bring the other half of the team into the KO area, but he was still doing tricky things.
Wheeljank did the same against me. I think it was also Snarl.
I think I think he did it against me too, but I think he brought in Slug instead, if I'm not mistaken.
And you know what? Like it felt very strong, but not broken. Like I don't think that aspect needed any changing.
Yeah, and also with our design to reduce their stars effectively, so they can play all 5 of them. They are still those star costs, so they still get hit hard by the bigger they are, which is thematic. You can still use them to tackle things smaller than them, which is still thematic. Yeah, it's been really fun, that strat.
And like I said, I think our only small concern is just let's make sure it doesn't become a problem in the future, because our next card is a card from the past that has become a problem.
Oh boy, here we go.
My boy, my dear friend Scorponok.
Do you want me to put it bluntly?
Yes. Pull
Turns
the
out
band-aid
he's
off.
a bit of an OA machine.
Yes. What made us realize this was Wave 10 Fusion Pistol, because that's the only black-blue weapon that Decepticons can use for OA.
I am going to add in a qualifier here. This technically is not a Wave 10 concern. This is something that got missed during the Scorponok beta, but it was Fusion Pistol that essentially led to a chain of realizations that was like, oh, wait, Scorponok's an OA machine.
Yeah.
We did test some OA Scorponok early in development, and when he used to get a strat, which I think gave all these upgrades to your hand, and along the way that kind of changed that you could start with a stinger. So we kind of we tried it when everything started in his hand, and when he played a free upgrade, and he could do it, but it wasn't that fast. And then later on in development, he started you could choose to start with the Stinger, and now that's caused the problem, I think.
Yeah. And I think also part of the problem was many players, I know myself and I know Gian, when he played Scorponok, we start with the Stinger in our deck because we want to equip it for that 2 damage.
And that's how I've always treated Scorponok as well, but yeah, it turns out when white icons tend to be most frequently seen on utilities in OA decks, and you have one at the start of the game.
Yeah. So there's a few ways we can go about doing this, depending on the severity of it. The softest potential fix would be to change it so that he doesn't start with the Stinger equipped. But that still might not be enough. At which case, if that's still an OA machine, we probably have to add some kind of condition to his attack trigger, like an icon flip requirement.
And that would be in line with other Titans, so that's not such an unusual thing to add.
Exactly, yeah. These potential fixes shouldn't take too long to test, since it's pretty obvious when something can easily pull off OA.
And that's like even considering the fact that I know there have been a few times in recent years where we've taken a look at something and went, wait, is this gonna break OA? But then pretty quickly we realize in testing that OA is in fact still a roulette wheel that sometimes decides to blow up in your face. And from what we've been seeing, Scorponok's face is a little too far away from the explosion to care.
Yeah.
So again, this isn't like a wave 10 problem like we said, but again, Fusion Pistol is kind of what really made us realize, oh crap.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm very grateful we found this out before we printed them.
Exactly. And then one more thing I'm going to add in here real quick. It's like these are by no means the only cards we are looking at right now. I know there's been some discussion surrounding Fusion Pistol and Deflection Barrier and a few other cards that I can't remember off the top of my head, but we are still keeping an eye on a decent amount of things. And again, this is good that we are having these discussions because, again, if we weren't, that would be throwing a lot of crazy stuff into the game and things would fall apart really fast.
Yeah. And that's also why we have these kind of beta bash events. They help us catch issues that we might have otherwise missed.
And also, one final thing I'm going to throw in here. Just because a card is strong does not mean it is broken. And this is something I constantly have to remind myself, and even then I sometimes slip up on it. But like, strong cards can exist in the game, but just because it is strong does not inherently make it problematic. It all depends on it depends on a lot of things, but the big things fundamentally, I think, are its frequency of use, how annoying it is in the grand scheme of things when it does get dropped, and how much of an impact it has when it gets dropped, both in isolation and in concert with other cards. Again,
And how easy it is to stop, I think, plays a very big part of it.
What was that?
How easy it is to stop versus how easy it is to pull off.
Yeah, that too. So, yeah, again, a lot of factors going into it, but I just wanted to bring that up as well because, again, we've been talking about a lot of cards feeling strong or feeling broken, and I wanted to make sure everybody understands kind of where our mindset is at with where strong cards are and where broken cards are.
Yeah. And just on this, still on the topic of Wave 10, I do want to point out we are still planning on having a King of the Hill event. I'm hoping to get it started here very soon. Just waiting for the current beta bash to end. But that'll also help us further cement, where we're at with all the testing and stuff.
And they can be really fun, those events.
For sure.
So.
And Z, you might want to run through again what the details are in case somebody missed the
Oh,
previous
yes,
episode.
yes. So the idea is it'll last for 1 week. You simply schedule a match with the current king, and if you beat him, you become king. But the catch is you need to have Wave 10 cards in your deck to become king.
So yeah, basically, the king is going to be like, come at me, bro, and somebody's going to be like, bring it on, bitch.
Yeah, exactly. That's
word
for word what they're going to say.
I will mandate it as such.
Be like, whoa. You didn't say come at me, bro. Sorry, you're no longer king.
For legal reasons, I am required to state that that part is a joke. We're not going to mandate that people say those specific words.
And I can't remember, is it a best of 1 for that or a best of 3?
That's a good question. I haven't actually considered that.
Given like the nature of it, you
I
think
would say probably a best of 1.
yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Just inherently the nature of it. Like if you want multiple matches to be played in a quick time frame, like asking for full best of 3s is a bit unreasonable
Yeah,
in
yeah.
certain context, in certain frame views. So yeah, I could
And
definitely
we
see
don't want people to get burnt out. We want them to play games rapidly. So yeah, best of 1.
Now, admittedly, that won't allow for sideboards to show up, but
You know what? If you want a sideboard, change your deck and challenge them again.
Yeah.
All right. And I think that's going to be it for this episode.
yeah, how long did that go on? That felt like one of our like most like in-depth longest episodes.
You know what? I think it's actually one of our shorter ones.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not sure yet.
Huh.
I'll see. I'll see. Because the timer I have going includes like us chatting beforehand and stuff.
Oh yeah, fair enough. Linear time, how does it work?
It's been 48 minutes since I rebooted my computer.
Fun.
All right. Next episode, Wave 10 will hopefully be out, and we'll be discussing some changes on how we handle releases post Wave 10. A small heads up though, the episode might be a little late given the holidays.
Also, again, there's been a few hot takes in this episode, so if you want to get into an argument with us over it, there's the comment section down below, or if you have anything else you want to say, you can leave those down there, or anonymously over at Transformers.cards/aliveon1. We welcome it all the time.
Absolutely. As always, Ozzy, thank you for coming on and joining us for this.
That should be great. Thanks.
All right, until next time, Poodles.
Peace out, y'all.